And we're in.
Hey, we're back. Hi, guys. Welcome to the Leeds Report podcast. We are on episode 6. So welcome. We have a sponsor today. So today's sponsor of today's show is Big Crocodile. So Big Crocodile, fitness wear, fitness clothing, sports and leisure wear, t-shirts, hoodies, jogging bottoms, leggings, those types of things. If you head over to the Big Crocodile website, which is www.bigcrocodile.co.uk, and also their Instagram page, and I know that they're running throughout the lockdown at the moment some really cool competitions to win hoodies and things like that. So thank you to Big Crocodile for supporting us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Big Crocodile. Okay, so episode 6. I'm Ray Farrow,
and I'm Danny Hayter.
And we got on the show today Ryan Jennings. Welcome to the show.
Hey, you all right, guys?
Hi, Ryan.
So, how you been, mate? You okay?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
As I say, I think the lockdown's starting to great
we're just
now.
Saying that now, we've been in lockdown coming up to 9 weeks. It is starting to grind on people. As you mentioned, it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and this episode I think ties in well with that, if that makes any sense. If you agree, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were saying, we were just discussing earlier, the isolation and, with the things I'm going to talk about, one of the main things is the isolation, the helplessness, and feeling it's all on you, whereas, on our signposts, and that's how I felt. But, there are people out there, there are people you can speak to. It's just to get the message across. You don't have to suffer in silence. There are people, there are services out there that are there to help you. So, hopefully with what I'm going to talk about, it might give people a little bit of encouragement or a little bit more of a signposting as to where they can go.
Yeah, let's hope so. Well, like we said, me and Danny started this podcast to help each story, help one person. If we can help one, then we would achieve our aim. So before we get right into the meat and potatoes of this story, let's just get a little bit of background of you. So where did you grow up?
So I grew up, I was originally born in Scarborough, North Yorkshire. Grew up around sort of the Bradford, Doncaster area. My dad's side of the family were all from Bradford. My mum's side were all from Doncaster. So I grew in and around Yorkshire. My dad worked in horse racing. So, and with horse racing, it's almost like a military family. You tend to move around quite a lot. So, outside of Yorkshire, I've lived like the New Forest, all the horse racing towns like Newmarket, Lambourne, Pulborough, Didcot. We moved quite a heck of a lot.
Yeah, that's so it makes school quite hard, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, as you said, it was like being in the military. You just move around and having to change places all the time. So, the schooling, that got tough. But we're a close knit family. My mum, my dad, my brother as well. He's just a few years younger than me. So we were a strong family and supportive family. So we
just got on with it.
Yeah, we just got on with it, for want of a better word, really. We were just into it. That was our life. That's how we sort of functioned in the world.
So did you get a chance to play any sports or anything, or were you involved in the horse racing?
To be honest, I learned how to tack up and ride a horse before I learned how to ride a bike. So and I could probably still do it now without even thinking. My dad was really into it, and he showed me from a very early age. I used to horse ride. I was never that great at being like 6 foot now as I am. I was always a bit too tall to do it. But yeah, I mean, other sports I sort of grew up with. Dart, all the good pub games like darts and pool. Dart.
You grew up with those sports.
Yeah, because my dad was actually a pretty decent. almost sort of semi-professional level dart player. So he
Oh,
showed
wow.
me how to play, and I just got sort of addicted to it. And people say it's not a sport. Yes, it is, because it's the only one I'm actually any good at. But I grew up good stuff as well, like cricket, rugby. Again, all those Yorkshire sports like rugby league, and I'm still a big Bradford Bulls fan. But yeah, rugby, cricket, those sort of things. Used to play rugby from a school. Played hockey from a school as well.
Pretty sporty then. You pretty much covered most bases there, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's rugby. I sort of really continued until like a few years ago. Then, injuries and stuff like that, it just become too painful after a while. But yeah, quite sporty, you could say.
Yeah. So obviously, growing up, you had a close knit family, but you had some dark times growing up. Can you take us back to some of the maybe the darker times growing up.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this for me now, this is probably the first time I've discussed this really in quite an open forum, and I'm more than sort of comfortable to do that. But yeah, when I was about 5 or 6, I was sexually abused. Now, this sort of it's only sort of now I'm dealing with it, about almost 40 years later. I always knew it had happened, but it was one of those things you really suppress it into the back of it really suppressed it into the back of my head. But yeah, 6 years ago, we were living in Didcot at the time. It wasn't anybody related or family. It was an older boy. I'm not sure, the details about it. Can't remember who it was. But it was only sort of really the last few months that the first person I told was my wife. And when I was going through the treatment, that's when I opened up about it. To actually admit, when I had my first session, which I'll come on to later, to actually admit that, it was actually like this huge physical stone that lifted off me. And I've only sort of recently told my dad, but now, with the treatment, I'm more than comfortable to talk about it. As I said, yes, this happened without going into the details. And again, I suppressed it for years, absolutely suppressed it for years, but it was always there, and it was always affecting me. I was avoiding certain situations or not, or lashing out at people. And recently with sort of things that have gone on again, which I'm going to talk about, it brought those memories racing back to the surface, where I've suppressed it for so many years, as in denial.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, Ryan. So without digging too deep, you put it into the back of your mind. Did you almost forget about it, and then it came up to the surface when other things happened, or was, like you said, you felt like it was always there, but was it a memory there, or
Yeah,
was it just something?
And I think because the age I was, and I'd always had this inkling in the back of my head that something had happened, something like this. And I think over the years, and and occasionally something would trigger it. The memories would come to the surface, and again, I would bat it back down. Denial. Suppressing it. Like I don't want to be reminded of that, because I didn't know how to deal with it. I did not know how to admit to, almost to the point like it never happened, because I never wanted to admit to myself that happened to me. It was almost like, and I've said, dealing with it now, what happened then about 30 odd years ago to me now is that period in time. It's not a memory. It's still quite raw, because it's only now that I'm actually dealing with it.
Yeah.
And I think now I feel I can be open about it, because I was always ashamed and afraid.
Do you think that's society that made you be like that, or is it just something inside you that you just couldn't? You think it's maybe people around you? So in terms of like relationships, you weren't that just wasn't the right time or the right person to actually speak to, or?
Yeah, as I said, and growing up with this in my head, and And I said, it's only recently that I've admitted it to my own dad that, this has happened. And the only people who know about it outside of this podcast was my wife and my dad. So,
Wow.
this is, but I feel now I'm in a position where I can talk about it. But I think at the time, and as I said before, we were a strong family, a loving dad, a loving mum, my brother, we had a really close family. I was, still keep in touch with all my cousins, my aunties, my uncles. We were such a close family that they didn't need to know that, because it would destroy them. It would absolutely destroy them. I always felt it would destroy them if I spoke about it.
That's incredibly brave of you to, as a young child, to have those types of thoughts, and to think like that as well, to think that it could be, like you say, breaking up the family unit. That is incredibly brave. And again, for you to actually be speaking about it now.
Yeah, to come out on the show and
to come out and speak about it. And yes, it really is.
And I think another thing about it as well, and with a therapist discussing about it, and as I said, for me now, it feels like I am back in that time, which is sort of an element of PTSD. And I still feel like sometimes that child, then when I was going through the therapy, it was just like, do you think I didn't understand really right from wrong at that age? If you know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't at 5, do you?
No, you don't. And now, and it,
especially 30 odd years ago, there wasn't information around for.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the support networks that are in place now weren't around then. So yeah, that was it. It was just suppression. I did not want to admit it to my family, because I was almost tainted or broken because of it. They didn't need to know, because it would absolutely destroy them. But yeah, with everything that's, that I've been going through at the moment with my therapy and my treatment, yeah, I'm in such a much better place. Yes, that happened. That will never go away. However, I'm in a much better place to talk about it, to overcome and just think, you know what, that happened. I'm on a different path now. And I will, use those experiences to be a better person. And I think that, this treatment and everything of, being open about it, it's really quite sort of cathartic for me. It's really almost like confidence boosting,
allow you to move on.
Yeah, that is exactly it. It's finally that barrier that has been in front, that protective shell that has been around me for all these years, is I can finally push beyond that.
You feel like a weight lifted off your shoulders?
Yeah, as I said, when I first opened up about it, it was that metaphorical way. I could feel it being lifted. Yeah. It was like this baggage that I'd been carrying around for all these years.
I mean, it's incredible. You're mentioning about sort of therapy and things, and we do want to get onto that, because I feel that it's going to help. I think this is where we could start to, you can start to potentially influence people to get help. But I just want to take you back to joining the Navy, and talking us through your joining up, the reasons behind it. Did you, because obviously you say that your dad was into horse races, so there was no family sort of connection, or was there someone else in the family that sort of moved you in that direction?
Not at all, really. The only person who was military was my granddad. He was in the Royal Artillery many, many years ago. But yeah, he was the only military person. And I think when I was growing up, I always... And it, when you were at school, like 13, you had the careers advisors come round, and the Navy guy I chatted to, and he was actually a really sound bloke, and that's why I joined. I mean, I didn't join late until I was about 28, and I did really well at my GCSEs. Started doing my A levels, but I was never career minded at that point, and I think that's when, the stress and anxiety of things that had gone on before was really starting to work at me, and that's when my sort of battles with depression and anxiety really started to come to the front. So being 18 and rebellious, it was drink, it was recreational drugs, that sort of a thing. So I was never career minded until much later. And I got married. It was a whirlwind marriage in my early 20s. That all went by the wayside. So I was back in my mum and dad's flat, sort of mid-20s, not a penny to my name, getting divorced. And it was almost like a moment of it's almost like a moment of clarity for me, where it's just like I started having this internal conversation with myself to go, right, you need to sort your life out here, do something. Then I started thinking, well, what do I want to do? Now, I worked in care work for many years as well, and I'd always liked care work, working with patients. So I thought, you know what, I should go back to school, go back to university, something like that. So yeah, I looked at nursing, and I'm not sure what it was, and I think I was just looking around, early days of the internet, and I was reading about sort of Iraq and stuff like that, and about nurses, military nurses who'd gone out, and I was like, oh, military nurses, that's interesting. So I sort of put two and two together. I went back to always wanted to look at joining the military, that structure, that discipline, that pretty much job for life. But I also wanted to be a nurse. And then it was just a case of, bit the bullet. One day, went off into Sheffield, spoke to the careers office, and oh yeah, we do have Navy nurses. Thank you, I want to go for that. And they were like, well, not many people get it. We've never had one through this careers office that's ever passed. Don't care. I want to do this. So yeah, I went through, I attended a selection board down in Fort Blockhouse, which is in Gosport, Portsmouth. And yeah, and I thought, I gave it a shot. Don't think I'm going to get it. And they rang me up on the train back then just to say that I'd got in. So yeah, so there was me doing cartwheels up and down the carriages. So yeah, a few months later, so January 2007, started at HMS Raleigh for my basic training. And then come April, I was funded to go to university for 3 years.
Wow, good.
All paid for, and I was getting amazing. A salary, my accommodation paid for. It was the best 3 years of my life.
Yeah.
And incidentally, I'm now in the chair where I do the selection for the people going through that process now. So it's almost come sort of full circle. And as I said, 13 years down the line, I've got my nursing qualification. I've done a postgraduate study, which was all funded. So I'm a medical a background in respiratory specialization and cardiology as well. If I ever leave the Navy, that's the qualifications I'm going to have under my belt. I've been running sort of military nurses departments, become a nurse advisor for medical nursing to the Royal Navy as a junior rate, which was pretty unheard of. I've deployed. Most recent time was South Sudan for the United Nations back in 2018. Gone around a lot of stuff. I worked in hospitals. I worked with the Royal Marines. And as I said, now I'm in the recruiting job where, I prepare nurses and biomedical scientists and radiographers, and that's student and qualified, and go out on the road and attend not so many recruiting events at the moment, but and 13 and a half years, and it's the best thing I've ever done. It's been an amazing career. And outside of that, the things I've done, the Albert Hall, the Remembrance Service where we come down the stairs, marching on the cenotaph. I went to Southampton, St. Mary's last year when England played there as one of the flag bearers. There's so many things that I've sort of done with my career that now I can actually, looking back and thinking, my God, I've actually achieved a hell of a lot in relatively a short space of time. And I've never really looked back. So, next, my next sort of goal is I'm going to, go back, do some studying. So ultimately I want to go into education. So teaching, student nurses, qualified nurses, more experienced nurses, potentially go to like university teaching or something like that. So that's my next goal.
Wow.
So,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's been an interesting career.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you say you got deployed quite a few places. Did you go to operational tours?
You know, the main one was South Sudan. I think a lot of times I'd always been preparing to go to places like but in the military, I've always fixed, you know, I wasn't one of these no, I'm not getting deployed. I was always like either posted or doing a job where I was non-deployable. You know, I'd always go through all the training to go. And then I'd take a job where, no, sorry, you can't deploy, you can't go on the fair, something like that. So, I mean, I was like teed up for Afghanistan, teed up for Sierra Leone and Ebola. And I was always just doing jobs or other roles where I couldn't go at that point. You know, I was on to go to Sudan with, you know, being Royal Navy 16 Medical Regiment a few years before, but I couldn't go on that for personal reasons because my mum passed away at the time. So, eventually I managed to get out there for a few months. So, you know, there was plenty of opportunities to deploy, just not went away as much as I'd like. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So you're married now, aren't you? And you're remarried, did you?
Yeah.
And you said how many children have you got?
So we've got one together. He's 6. He's 6 now. He's 7 in about 3 weeks. And the other boy, he is from a previous marriage.
Okay. Are you saying to me before that there was complications with the birth?
Yeah. So with Hudson, who is my youngest. So when he was born, 2013, and this is where the PTSD really came about. He was, maternity went fine, everything was like that. He was following all the right sort of stuff. I don't know too much about maternity. He had to be induced in the end because he was like 2 weeks overdue. I mean, he was going to be a big baby anyway. We knew that. And anyway, he got induced and we were in like the maternity room and there was a midwife and a student. And Julie's there and I'm just sat down and we were in hospital for like, awake for like 36 hours, just waiting for him to arrive. And then at one point, I was just sat there, it's about 11 o'clock at night. I was just sort of reading the paper. And then all of a sudden, because I could hear the monitors going, and then all of a sudden I could hear the monitors start going mad. So I looked up, looked at her, and the colour had gone out of her face. She'd gone white as a sheet. And she looked like she looked almost half dead. I was like, what's going on? Straight away, the midwife and the student ran it, pulling the emergency button. Team of people came running in, and I'm stood there like not in control of the situation, not knowing what the hell's going on. And it was and what had transpired is where she shifted her position, and then suddenly the baby got the cord like wrapped around his neck, so it was basically effectively choking him. And then he like compressed an artery or something like that on her. That's why she dropped. So it was like, while all this chaos is going on, I'm in the corner, not knowing what the hell's going on, absolutely panicking because, for me being a nurse in an emergency situation, it was always like I wanted to get in there and help, and the fact that I could not do anything about it, and at the time. And now I think about it now with my therapist, she was in the best possible hands and in the best possible place with the best possible people. But that's not how your brain works at that time. It's pure emotion. And I couldn't do anything. Anyway, they went, right, we're going for a C-section, emergency cesarean section, we're gone. You can't come in here. So to me, you can't go, because you can't when it's an emergency because they have to sedate her and everything like that. So went in, everybody, so from that moment of chaos to like from silence. And all I could hear was just like the monitor, just because when you take all the monitoring equipment off, it's just this ping, ping, ping to let you know that nobody switched that off. Yeah. And I was stood in this empty room with this monitor just ping, 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 absolutely going off my head because I didn't know what and my brain was spiraling. There was no thought process. It was like a complete rave in my head. I just could not, because I was catastrophizing. I was like, they're dead. They must be dead. Nobody's told me anything. They've rushed out. They're looking at the state of her. The fact I didn't know anything and I couldn't do anything. I just assumed that they'd both gone. And for what was like a few minutes, to me, it felt like days. And anyway, they came and got me, and yeah, she was absolutely fine. He was fine. But at that moment in time, not knowing, not being in control, it was like I had no control over the situation, and that is where the PTSD really, really gripped. Yeah, as I said, looking back now, it's like, as I said, the best possible team was there, looked after, everything was fine, but I couldn't process that. I was just going off pure adrenaline and emotion, and just fearing the worst, because it was like I'd gone into like a fight or flight mode. No rational thought. I need to get in there. I need to help. No, you're not doing it. So I was stood, just it's.
Is it the powerless that made you feel the worst? And do you think that's because of what happened when you was younger? You felt powerless then?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. And I was speaking with my therapist this morning, and we had the same sort of conversation. And it is that, and we touched on it, is that sense of, from then I sort of subconsciously built up this, I couldn't take any sort of criticism. Anything could not be out of place. Almost this subconscious controlling nature, that anything that I couldn't control, I could not deal with. And it was a feeling of, if I was left to feel helpless or not in control, I just emotionally could not handle it whatsoever. And it, as I said, it's that helplessness, not being able to make sense of the situation at the time. It destroyed me. It really, really destroyed me.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to ask, in terms of the PTSD, how bad did it get?
So it really came to a boil about a year ago now. Things had been getting out of control. My anger was slowly increasing. 3 years ago, lost my mum to cancer, and I think that is where I really got pushed over the edge. The anger, I was not rebelling. I was just shouting all the time. I couldn't tolerate the kids. I couldn't tolerate my wife. It wasn't physical or anything like that, but I was shouting all the time. I just had no patience whatsoever. And I was starting to drink every night, not to the point of getting paralytic or not being able to do my job or being unsafe, but I had to have at least one drink per night. Couldn't sleep, anything like that. And so with my stepson, he's on the spectrum. He has a number of different, he's autistic, ASD, dyspraxia. He's got a number of different issues. But when he was having his moments, I couldn't deal with that, and it just got worse. Instead of like, okay, he's been really out of control. I can't control this. I just need to walk away. I couldn't walk away. And then I just get into this argument with him. And arguing with children in general is just fruitless. It's absolutely pointless. But I always took it personal from him. He was 10, 11 years old. But I took it personal, and I couldn't deal with him. And it made me lash out, because it was starting to trigger these memories again, not being able to control a situation, panicking, not thinking rationally. It was just on pure emotion, and it got to a point where I just basically I grabbed him and threw him in his room. I don't remember doing it, but I did it. And and then it was like I couldn't remember doing it, and then suddenly a few seconds later I was like 3, 2, 1, you're back in the room. And Julie's screaming at me, and the kids are screaming, and they're upset, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm whirlwinding it, absolutely whirlwind. And she threw me out. The anger got too much, because now it got to a point. I mean, I'm not violent, I'm not aggressive, I'm the most laid back man you could ever meet. But so that was not me. That was completely out of character. You know, the shouting was, and anger got so bad that it got to, you know, grabbing him and to a point. And that, you know, in it, I bruised his arm. I was horrified. I was like, oh my God, I am not in control. And then I got thrown out of the house, and it basically ended up where I went up to Portsdown Cliff, and I stood there, and I was a few steps away from killing myself. That I could not deal with my head anymore. And it wasn't like, you know, maybe this is an option. It was at that moment, it was like, I'm doing this. I'm done. I couldn't control everything. I'd become so emotionally dead. The emotion, you know, it's almost physical. The emotion gets so much over the years that my brain snapped, and I just couldn't. I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing left. I couldn't do anything physically anymore. I couldn't even think rationally anymore. And that was it. And, you know, and then, you know,
What
killing
changed?
myself.
Yeah, but you like you said, you on the point of killing yourself. What changed then to make you seek? Well, obviously you know, what stopped you from killing yourself, and what made you go then, right, I've got to seek help?
You know, I've thought about this time and time again, and I cannot put my finger on what stopped me. I mean, it was, I'd got out of my car and I was walking. There was nothing in my head. I was in this weird, because I always wondered, you know, how do people's thought processes go when they do something like that? But at that time, you know, I had nothing in my head. I couldn't deal with anything anymore. I was just numb, completely numb inside, you know, and I wasn't thinking about my job or my family or anything like that. I was just like, I can't live with this turmoil in my head anymore. And then I did, and I started walking, and it got to, I was literally about 10 steps away from the edge of the cliff. If you've ever been to the top of the cliff, it's like a little metal fence and it's a straight drop. That's where I got to. I was walking and I had no thought process. Nothing was stopping me. And then all of a sudden I stopped. And I don't know what did it. I don't know if there was that sudden little spark in the deep recesses of my mind, or like divine intervention from my mum looking over me. I honestly don't know, but I stopped, and I stood there for quite a long sense of time, and then I just walked, and I got back in my car, and then so next morning I just went straight to something made me yeah, I'm not sure what it was. Maybe you know, there were a number of different things.
Was that the turning point then? So you stood on top there by that fence. Do you think that might have been that turning point? Where you just thought, right,
as I said, where I stopped, yeah, and I stopped and I just sort of looked, and it was almost like, because it got to a point, because as I said, there's a little metal fence, and I put my hands on the fence, and I think that like reorientated me back into the real world, like some sort of contact. And I just stood there, and it was, and I just sort of slowly woke up. Yeah, and that's when, as I said, I just turned around and went back in my car. So maybe it was the handrail, as I said, maybe it was some weird divine intervention, if you believe in that sort of stuff.
So after that moment, Ryan, you seeked help for your post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yeah, it was at that point, because
yeah, what was, yeah,
because
how did you go about finding help then?
So it was that point when, and I had that night to think about it, you know, I suddenly lost my house, my family. I'd lashed out at my loved ones, and I wanted to do myself in. This is not me. This is not Ryan. So next morning, it was a Monday morning, I went straight to the medical centre on the naval base, presented at fresh cases, and I think the doctor, he just saw me and he just opened his door and he went, "We need to talk." I was broken, absolutely broken. He's like, "We need to talk." So, and then it's gone from there. So obviously there were, potential safeguarding issues, which I spoke to the police about, because I did grab him, just as like, "Look, this happened. I'm now dealing with it. I'm outside of out. I moved out. I moved into a room on the base. So straight away, the doctor got me on medication, some antidepressants, put me on sick leave for a little bit. So I went back home to my dad's just to get out the environment. And then I went to DCMH, Defence Community Mental Health guys, and the first meeting I had with my key worker, a mental health nurse, and it was literally just a download from me for 2 hours. Everything in my head just downloaded, and that's when I first sort of admitted to myself about the abuse from years ago as well. And just that, sat there getting it off my chest was, as I said earlier, it was, I could feel this weight lifting. And I wasn't out of the woods. The past year has been really difficult. The treatment process it's not easy, and it is long. It's been a lot of talking about some really deep rooted stuff, revisiting that moment in time, stuff like that. But I've been going to group therapy classes with other people who've got PTSD. Because at that, as I said, that once I had that meeting with the nurse, and then I met with a psychologist, and then I got diagnosed with PTSD, mainly from when Hudson was born, but with my mum dying and the abuse as well, it's all like compounded to the point where it just blew. And with the PTSD is really, I mean, we talk about it all the time, but it's hard to understand how it affects people. It's not just a case of, and I always thought, if I've got PTSD, it's only from this. I work with guys who've lost mates on the front line, been, landmines, things like that. And it's like, their PTSD is much worse than mine. It's not. They taught me, no, PTSD is individual to you. Everybody's brain deals with the PTSD in a different way. And the PTSD is, it's something that happened, but because it was so acute, that your brain cannot process it as a memory. It sticks sort of in your middle brain, so the part of your brain where your emotions function, your fight or flight sort of responses to threats. So when something triggers this thought process, so for me, like with Hudson, I couldn't watch programs like 24 Hours in A&E or Screaming Children, things like that, because that used to trigger me because I was back in that environment. Even though I knew it, my brain didn't, because where that memory resides, you don't have a concept of time. So when something triggers that memory, your brain assumes that you are back in that moment. So straight away, your defenses have gone up. Your fight or flight sort of responses to it. Your brain doesn't know any other way to deal with it.
So when you were, obviously at the moment you are going through therapy as we speak, do you have any other coping mechanisms that you use that sort of personally help you, as well as obviously talking to people?
Yeah, so now with the sort of therapy, I'm starting to love myself again. I'm starting to feel, get some more confidence in myself. Outside of the stuff I'm doing, like my cognitive behavior therapy, which is all to, help your brain, process that event into a memory so you don't react as much. But the biggest thing I found was talking, was opening up. I said that first talk I had with my mental health key worker, when I downloaded for 2 hours and told absolutely everything, even the abuse. That was a major step. That's the hardest thing I've ever done, and that was the biggest step. That was the biggest part of it. Admitting, talking about it, that was huge for me. Attending group therapy sessions as well, so talking to other people who are in the having the same.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Group therapy. So you listening to other people's stories as well to make you feel like you're not the only one. Like obviously, while we're doing the podcast, is try to to make people feel that they're not isolated. They're not going through the situation. Well, they're not the only ones going through the situations like yours. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was the thing. When I started the sessions, it was like everybody there had PTSD from whatever situation, and the first thing the nurse said was, we're not going to talk about what caused our PTSD because it's all individual to us. Just because what happened to one person, the person next to you might be able to deal with it, and vice versa. So one thing is just like, but it was just, again, it was that I didn't feel alone. I was like, you know what, people have this, but for you at that time, you feel like you're on your own. The PTSD in your own head makes you feel so isolated. But just to sit there, and some of us spoke, some of us didn't. It's how we felt, and they just went through, again, like the science stuff, why your brain behaves the way it does, and what the sort of future is going to be. What the treatment is laid out, and and that was massive for me. Just to sit there and figure out why things are going the way it is, and to not be sort of ashamed or afraid of me. And it's that old saying that you hear quite a lot about, I felt okay to not be okay. I felt, yeah, I've got this. However, I'm dealing with this. So yeah, the talking and the group therapy sessions, as I said, just with other people who were going through it just reinforced the fact to me that, I wasn't alone. There were people there. There were people I could speak to. If we needed to speak in private, there were people there to speak in private. People were on the end of a phone. That was it. They weren't miles away. I could just call somebody. So, and that to me is, it sounds so simple, but at the time, it was massive for me. So yeah, the talking and
So
talking
people
to
that understood what you were going through.
Yeah, it was like a support group.
Yeah.
So we could all just, sit and talk, and yeah, and that was, again, the talking, it just releases so much pressure out of your head. For me, that that was
I
huge.
think that's what people find the hardest bit, isn't it? To initially open up when they are feeling. A lot of people in your situation and other situations, have these stresses. They tend to dig a hole, put it in there, and then try to forget about it. And
Yeah.
but like you say, eventually it rises to the surface, and
Yeah, and that proved it last year. I mean, luckily, and I got to the very edge. Literally to the very edge. If I hadn't dealt with it at that time, it's quite possible I would not be here now. It got that bad. I got to that point where before I did anything about it. So, if if anybody, is going through that, and my advice is like, please talk, please reach out. Don't leave it until
to the last moment,
till the very end, like I did.
Yeah.
And outside the.
Sorry, Ryan. Before we
Go on.
So you had plenty of warning signs leading up to that.
Yeah.
That moment, didn't you? And that's what we want to try to get across to people. They are starting to feel this pressure, starting to feel the temperature bubbling up. That's the time when you want to be starting to seek help and not wait until you get to the end of a cliff.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and again for me it was, and I could see this now looking back now, and I could see the stuff, but I was just always in denial about it.
Yeah,
You
sometimes
know,
you just
the anger and the increased drinking and stuff like that, and I was never in a good place. I just never felt in a good place ever. Yeah, and that's it. As you said, it just all spilled out and got to a point where I just couldn't do it. So it's if you're recognizing stuff, and everybody reacts differently, but if and I think your friends are very good as well. Your friends and family pointing sort of stuff out. When you're like, you're okay, you're a little bit different, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes listen to them, because people used to say it to me all the time, and I was like, yeah, fine, go away. But actually, maybe I should have listened to them, because your friends and family know you better than something yourself sometimes. So really listen to, or whoever. It's just it's hard to recognize different signs and
and if you
symptoms.
are a friend and you've got someone who is showing these signs, then I think it's really important that you do let them know. Sometimes it's hard to say it to someone because you don't want to upset them, but I think sometimes you have to be sort of kind of cruel to be kind, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And like get a grip of them, really. Like say, look, you're gonna have to see someone or something like that, something along the lines of, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it might just be simple as something like just send a message like, yeah, here here if you need me.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Sometimes
yeah,
that's all it takes, isn't it? Just a quick message or a quick phone call.
and
Can all
yeah,
it needs.
and I think for me, especially when I really hit that low ebb and I started on the treatment, and it was a case of like my mate, something like that. It would just be so if I was feeling down, and I still do have poor days, but sometimes I'll say to him, look, if I haven't been in touch for a while, just send me a text message, just like, you're okay, and it just reinforces that. Yeah, you know what, I'm fine. So
Just
something
just
like that.
just one with the treatment. So were you on medication as well as being as well as your sessions as well?
Mm. Yeah, and there's a lot of self-help as well. There are a lot of things you can do. Like first one, like physical exercise. Again, something we pay quite lip service to, but when you do physical exercise, once you've done it, I mean, to get my trainers on and walk into the gym or go out for a run, that's the hardest part of the session for me, to get there. Because once you're doing a session or something like that, or it might not be the gym, it might be a hobby, it gives you that single mind focus. Because
Yeah.
when you're going for a run or you're doing exercise, you're focused on that task there, so you're not thinking about the bad stuff. Or things I've started, I used to be like a graphic artist years ago. I've started doing that again, because it gives me my brain a focus
Yeah.
to quieten it down. And simple things as well, like you hear mindfulness technique, breathing techniques. The breathing techniques are probably the best thing I do, because just sitting in a quiet place for like 10 minutes, just slowing your breathing down, and there's plenty of videos out on YouTube.
Yeah.
But to control your breathing, because if breathing slowly for 10 minutes, it tells that primitive part of your brain, well, if you're breathing slowly, that means you're not in danger, so I'm going to slow you down a bit.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of breathing exercises. One I like to do is box breathing. That's quite a good one for just calming everything down. And then because you're focusing on the breathing, it's hard to sort of concentrate on anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when you first start it's quite hard, because
Yeah.
your mind just, but once you've done it a few times, and it really does work. For me, it's the best thing I do. It's just like at the end of the day, is just sit down 10 minutes, headphones or a YouTube video with somebody doing it with you. And I said, it just slows your mind down. It just quietens you down for that 10 minutes and just relaxes you. It works an absolute treat. It really does. But again, as I said, hobbies, I said, started drawing, trying to get back into my phys again. So that's, it's the motivation as well to do it. It's getting there. But I'm starting to slowly love life again.
That's good.
And And I think with this whole treatment, it's, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not isolated. There are people there. But at the end of the day, I had to do this for me, rather than, the people who it could affect. Yes, ultimately, but it's me. I had to do this for me. And that's it. And anybody who's doing the treatment, you have to do it for you. You can't do it for anybody else. It has to be you.
It's a really strong message. Really, really strong message. What does the future hold? What does the future hold for Ryan Jennings? Obviously, you've got you're going through your treatment at the moment, and from what you're saying, obviously you really finding that's really helping, and it'd be really interesting to see, just to see what the future holds for you at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not looking too far ahead at the moment. I do have ultimate goals. But like with my treatment, because I've just started the CBT therapy, so it's usually about 12 weeks, a session a week, or, it ebbs and flows. But I'm taking each day as it comes, rather than worrying about things that have happened in the past, things that are about to worry in the future, which was like the worst bit of my PTSD. I'm just sort of focusing on today. And then I can sort of sit back, reflect on a day, like, how was today? You know what? Today was not bad. Hopefully tomorrow's going to be the same. So I'm just taking each day as it comes. I know I'm not going to have great days all the time, but they're coming, I'm getting those good days more and more often. I've got tools that I'm using every day. So hopefully once this therapy, I get to the end of it, I'll see, I'll reassess. It's every time it's giving me more and more tools to adapt, to cope, to enjoy my life again. Next thing after that will be, start, rebuilding the trust with my family. Yeah, and who knows? As I said, I've got the tools now. I've got the confidence. I just don't want to rush ahead of myself. I'm just going to take each day as it comes. Do my therapy, do my treatment, and yeah, just enjoy each day.
Are you getting a chance to speak to your family at the moment?
Yeah, we're on a much better. We're definitely in a much better place than we are when we are. I'm still not at home yet. I do not feel safe yet. However, I still get. I'm seeing my son on the weekend. Speak to him pretty much every day. It's getting there. It's definitely improved.
That's good to hear, mate.
That's good news.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I think it was involving them in my treatment.
Okay.
I said, yes, you need to do this for you ultimately. However, there are people there to support you. They might not know anything about it, but sometimes just for somebody, people say, I'm here to listen. Sometimes that's all it takes. You don't want answers. You just want somebody you can just download to. Do you feel better for that? Yeah, I do actually. Thank you very much. See you later. Sometimes that is all it needs. Just somebody just to reach out to.
And that's what you say to people now, or anyone who's listening that's been through a similar situation. That's be your first port of call, would you say?
Yeah, ultimately in my advice, for whatever you've been through, talk, reach out, do not suffer in silence. You don't have to do it alone. There are people out there to help you. Yes, there are charities, there are organizations, but your friends and family, they're there to help you. Reach out to them before it gets
like you said, at the moment, it's we're in a lockdown situation at the moment, which can make these feelings worse.
Yeah.
And how's that been for you? Is
that... Yeah, I mean, it's been difficult at the start, but again, I've it's almost like a deployment for us, really. Sort of used to it, but things like this, and like me and my friends who they're sort of nurses as well, medical people. We sort of chat. We chatted on Zoom, and I speak to my son pretty much every day. I speak to my dad, and I still sort of see people, dotted around on the camp. So when you're in the room on your own, yeah, it can be difficult because you really are sort of left with your own thoughts. but yeah, but I know if it gets to me, the isolation, there's, people I can reach out to and speak to. And I think, something like Zoom and stuff like that, I think it's absolutely, it's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, for anybody who's, depression, anxiety, in this isolated lockdown, it's just talk to people, just message. Surely you've all got somebody you can talk to. Just talk to them, even if it's just like the Samaritans. The Samaritans are absolutely genius. But just and it just reinforces that there's somebody out there, there's somebody there.
Yeah, definitely.
And just try and keep yourself busy. The motivation's hard, with this lockdown. I think it is really starting to get to people now, but just motivate. Sometimes it might be just go for a walk, or anything like that, just to change the environment. Don't stay.
It's that sitting down, isn't it? Sitting down, like you said, on your own, with your own thoughts. That's probably the worst situation you could be in when you're feeling low. So keep yourself active. That's why exercise is good, because it takes you out of your head for a bit. But anything like you say, drawing or anything that's going to basically take you away from being isolated in your own head.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots out there to do that, with the internet, there's all sorts of YouTube. You can do online courses, anything, read book, anything, just to to keep your brain occupied, give your brain, because you've got to exercise your brain as well as your body.
Yeah, definitely.
If you just leave it to go stale, it will start to do its own thing. So, give it something to do.
Stimulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully the lockdown won't be too much longer. But
no.
I don't know. Yeah.
Touch wood.
Let's not go into that. Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. As I said, a lot of the stuff I've talked about today, it's the first time I've really been open about it. So,
it's incredibly brave. Really, really brave.
Thanks.
It is brave, mate. Yeah. Can't thank you enough.
No.
We're pretty sure someone will listen to this and be able to, hopefully, give them strength to sort of seek that help early rather than leaving it like you did.
Yeah, I'm proof of that. I'm coming out the other side, and I'm one of the most stubborn people I know. So if I can do it, then hopefully, if just one person takes away a little bit of advice, then that's the best thing for me.
Yeah.
I'm proof. Been there, went through all this. And I'm coming out the other side, and I am in one of the best. I'm in a much better place in my own head that I have been for as long as I can remember, to be honest. So, one day at a time.
Well done, mate. Well done for being strong. Not just for coming on here, but for going through that tough time. All your treatment and that, and staying strong, and good things will come of that.
Cheers, guys.
I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well done, mate.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, guys. So, who we got on the next episode, Danny?
So next episode we have got Matthew Worrell. So Matthew's got a really, really interesting story in and around becoming really poorly growing up and how that's affected his life moving forward. Really, really interesting story that I think might resonate with a few people. Looking forward to chatting to Matt in the next episode, in episode 7. But thank you, Ryan. Absolutely
pleasure. Thank you.
Incredible story there, and I really think that, as Ray mentioned at the beginning, Mental Health Week this week is certainly going to, your story is certainly going to hopefully help a number of people out there. If they listen, you've certainly helped to keep talking and things like that. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, YouTube channel, like and share. And also we're on some other means now, aren't we, Dan?
Yeah, so new platforms for us, obviously Spotify, and we've now accepted on the podcast app on your Apple phone as well. So If you've got an Apple product, you can click into your podcast app, search the Legion Report podcast, and you'll find us and all of our episodes on there for you to sit and enjoy.
Brilliant. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll have you back shortly.
Take care, guys.
Take care.